Look at this family photo from 1982. A mother, 3 children, and a father standing in front of their suburban home. Everything seems normal until you notice something that shouldn't be possible. The father in this picture would change everything we thought we knew about one small town's darkest secret. Sarah Chen worked as a photo archivist at the Millbrook Historical Society. Her job was simple: sort through old photographs, scan them, and add them to the digital collection. She'd seen thousands of family photos over the years: birthday parties, weddings, graduations. Nothing ever stood out as unusual until that Tuesday morning in October when she opened a dusty box labeled Henderson Estate Sale 1982. The first photo showed a typical family. The mother wore a floral dress. 3 kids smiled at the camera. The youngest couldn't have been more than 5. But the father caught Sarah's attention immediately. Something about his face seemed too perfect, too symmetrical. His smile didn't reach his eyes. She set the photo aside and continued sorting through the box. 20 minutes later, she found another family photo. This one was older, maybe from the 1960s based on the clothing styles. Different mother, different children, but the father looked exactly the same. Not similar, exactly the same. Same face, same age, same strange, perfect features. Sarah's hands started shaking as she compared the 2 photographs side by side. The Henderson family had lived in Millbrook for generations. Sarah knew their history. The estate sale happened after old Margaret Henderson died without any living relatives. These photos came from her attic. But who was this man who appeared in family photos 20 years apart without aging a single day? Sarah spent the rest of the morning searching through the Historical Society's archives. She found census records, newspaper clippings, and more photographs. The Henderson family tree was well documented. Margaret's father, Thomas Henderson, had died in 1963. The death certificate listed his age as 42. Sarah looked at the photo from 1982 again. If this was Thomas Henderson, he would have been over 60 years old. But the man in the photo looked no older than 35. She decided to dig deeper. The local newspaper archives held dozens of stories about the Henderson family. They owned the biggest farm in town. Thomas Henderson was remembered as a pillar of the community. But something strange happened in 1963. The entire family disappeared for 3 months. When they returned, Thomas was dead, and his wife Martha never spoke about where they had been. Sarah found the obituary. It mentioned Thomas's devotion to his family but gave few personal details. No mention of where he was born. No parents listed. The funeral was closed casket. Martha Henderson remarried 2 years later to a man named Robert Mills. Sarah's blood ran cold when she found their wedding photo. Robert Mills had the exact same face as Thomas Henderson. The pattern continued through the decades. Every 15 to 20 years, the man with the perfect face would disappear and return with a new name, always marrying into the same family, always looking exactly 35 years old. The women he married always died young. Their children often disappeared without explanation. Margaret Henderson was the only one who survived to old age, and she never married. Sarah photographed every piece of evidence she found. By late afternoon, she had assembled a timeline that spanned over 100 years. The oldest photo she found was from 1891. A stern-looking family posed in front of a farmhouse. The man standing behind them had that same impossible face. Same age, same unsettling perfection. She needed more information. The town library had a section dedicated to local folklore and legends. Most of it was typical small-town ghost stories. But one book caught her attention. Shadows in the Corn, Unexplained Mysteries of Millbrook County, published in 1978. The author, Professor David Krantz, had taught at the local college before his sudden death in 1979. The book contained a chapter about the Henderson farm. Krantz wrote about strange lights seen in the fields at night, animals found drained of blood, children who claimed to see a tall man watching them from the corn rows. But the most interesting part was a footnote. Krantz claimed to have found evidence of something living beneath the farm, something that had been there long before the first settlers arrived. Sarah tried to find more of Krantz's research. The college library had archived his papers. Most of them were standard academic work. But in a folder marked Personal Research, she found his handwritten notes about the Henderson farm. The writing became increasingly frantic as the dates progressed. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. Krantz had been watching the Henderson family. He believed the man in the photographs wasn't human. The notes described finding cave systems beneath the farm. Inside, he claimed to have seen things that defied explanation. Walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at, bones that weren't quite human, and in the deepest chamber, something that might have been an altar. The professor's final notes were almost illegible. He wrote about being followed, about seeing the man with the perfect face standing outside his house at night, about dreams where his skin was being peeled away layer by layer. The last line simply read, "They know, I know." Sarah realized she had been at the Historical Society for 12 hours. The building was empty except for her. As she gathered her things, she noticed something she had missed before. In the photo, barely visible in the background, someone had written something on the house's mailbox. She used the scanner to enlarge that section of the image. The numbers were clear. 4821. Sarah's heart stopped. That was her current address. She had moved into that house 6 months ago. The rental company said it had been empty for years. The previous tenants had left suddenly without explanation, just like dozens of other families connected to the man in the photographs. She drove home with her doors locked and checked every mirror constantly. The house looked normal from the outside, but now she noticed things she had ignored before. The basement door that was painted shut, the cold spot in the hallway that never warmed up, the way her cat refused to go into certain rooms. Sarah spent the night researching property records online. Her house had changed hands 16 times in the last 40 years. Never sold, always abandoned. The longest anyone had lived there was 18 months. She found a police report from 1994. A family of 4 had vanished overnight, leaving everything behind. Even their cars were still in the driveway. The next morning, she called in sick to work. She needed to know more about her house and its connection to the Henderson farm. The county courthouse had property maps dating back to the 1800s. Her house sat on land that had once been part of the original Henderson property. It was built in 1952, supposedly as housing for farm workers. But the construction permits showed something odd. The foundation was dug much deeper than necessary, almost like they were building on top of something that was already there. Sarah returned home to pack. She couldn't stay there another night, but when she entered her bedroom, she found something that hadn't been there before. A photograph placed carefully on her pillow. It showed her sleeping in that very bed. The photo was dated the previous night. Standing in the dark corner of the room was a figure. The face was turned away from the camera, but she could see enough to know who it was. She ran from the house and drove to the only person who might believe her. Dr. Patricia Vance taught folklore at the college and had known Professor Krantz. Patricia's office was cramped and filled with books about mythology and local legends. Sarah showed her everything she had found. Patricia studied the photographs for a long time before speaking. Patricia had her own research about Millbrook, stories that predated the town's founding. Native American tribes had avoided this area for centuries. They called it cursed ground. The first European settlers reported finding stone structures in the forest that seemed ancient but wrong somehow, like someone had tried to copy human architecture without understanding it. Together, they pieced together a horrifying possibility. The thing with the perfect face wasn't just old. It was ancient. It had been here before humans arrived. It copied human appearance but never quite got it right. That's why its face seemed too perfect. It was mimicking what it thought humans should look like, and it needed humans for something. That's why it kept marrying into families, having children, and then making them disappear. Patricia had a theory about what happened to the missing people. The cave systems Krantz had found weren't natural. They were made by something, or for something. The Henderson farm sat on top of an entire network of tunnels, some of them connected to basements of houses built on the old property, houses like Sarah's. They decided to go to the farm together. It had been abandoned since Margaret Henderson's death. The fields were overgrown. The house was falling apart. But the barn still stood solid and strange against the sky. Its doors were chained shut. The chains looked new. Inside the barn, they found the entrance Krantz had described. Stone steps led down into darkness. The walls were carved with symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. The air grew thick and cold as they descended. Their flashlights barely penetrated the darkness ahead. The first chamber contained photographs. Hundreds of them lined the walls, all showing the same man with different families across different decades. But these photos showed things the ones above ground didn't. The children's eyes reflecting light like animals. the wives' faces gradually becoming less human in each successive photo, and in the newest photos, people Sarah recognized, people who had recently gone missing from town. The second chamber was worse. It held objects that couldn't exist, sculptures of impossible shapes, books written in languages that used symbols instead of letters, and in glass cases, things that might have been scientific specimens, or religious artifacts, or both. Patricia recognized some of the symbols from her research. They were older than any known human civilization. The final chamber's door was metal and modern. It had been installed recently. Through a small window, they could see inside. The missing people were there, all of them, standing perfectly still in rows. Their eyes were open but empty. They weren't dead. They weren't alive. They were waiting. In the center of the room stood the man from the photographs. But now Sarah could see what he really was. The human shape was just a covering, like clothing made of flesh. Underneath was something that had too many angles, too many joints, too many eyes. It was looking right at them. They ran, up the stairs, through the barn, across the overgrown fields. Sarah's car wouldn't start at first. When it finally did, they drove straight to the state police. But when they tried to show the officers the photographs Sarah had taken in the cave, her phone was empty. Every piece of digital evidence had been erased. The physical photographs from the Historical Society were gone too. Even Patricia's research had vanished from her office. Nobody believed them. The Henderson farm was searched, but the barn was empty. No stairs, no chambers, no missing people. Sarah was fired from the Historical Society for stealing archived photographs. Patricia was put on administrative leave. The town seemed to collectively decide they were having a shared delusion. But Sarah knows the truth. She sees him sometimes, standing across the street, sitting in the back of the coffee shop, always watching, always with that perfect face and empty smile. She moved to another state, but he followed. He's waiting for something. She doesn't know what. The worst part is the children. She sees them too now, the ones from the photographs. They haven't aged either. They walk through crowds like normal people, but nobody else seems to notice their eyes never blink, or that their movements are just slightly wrong, like someone practicing being human but not quite succeeding. Sarah still researches when she can. She's found similar stories in other towns, other families with photographs that don't make sense, other things wearing human faces. There are more of them than anyone wants to believe. They've been here longer than us, and they're getting better at pretending. The Henderson farm was demolished last year. They're building a shopping center on the land. The construction workers report no problems, but Sarah knows the chambers are still down there, deeper than anyone is digging, waiting. The missing people are still standing in their rows, still neither dead nor alive. She keeps one photograph, the one that was left on her pillow. It reminds her that this is real, that she's not crazy, and that somewhere, in a shape that isn't quite human, something is still watching her. It knows she knows, and someday, when she least expects it, she'll wake up to find herself standing in those chambers too. Another photograph on another wall, another person who learned too much. If you find old family photographs in estate sales or antique stores, look carefully at the faces. Check if anyone appears in pictures they shouldn't. See if their features are too perfect, too symmetrical. Notice if their smile doesn't reach their eyes, because they're out there. They've always been out there, and once you see them, they see you too. The truth about the Henderson family photos isn't just a local mystery. It's a warning. Some things are better left unknown. Some photographs should never be found, and some secrets are hiding in plain sight, waiting behind perfect faces and empty smiles. Sarah knows this now. She wishes she didn't. But it's too late to forget. What would you do if you found a photograph that revealed something impossible? Would you investigate like Sarah did? Or would you walk away and pretend you never saw it? The choice might save your life, or doom you to become another picture on another wall in another chamber that supposedly doesn't exist. Think about that the next time you look through old family photos. You never know what might be looking back.